So welcome, Danielle. Danielle was featured in the last series of FarmED podcasts a couple of years ago, weren't you? Talking about worms, because you are an expert on worms and you love worms. Mm-hmm. And now you are our compost expert, which is a sort of a natural progression, it feels, from the worms to the compost, because they're very interlinked, aren't they? So can you tell me first of all why you love compost?
So first of all, with that earthworm podcast that we did last time, I've learned so much more, because I was only looking at earthworms in the field and in the soil, because that, I guess, is their natural habitat. But now I've kind of used earthworms as a basis to explore composting more, and obviously I'm a bit biased. I think earthworms are the best form of composting, but composting as a principle is essentially turning food waste, garden waste, anything that has kind of reached the end of its life, end of its usage, then gets turned into something more valuable to be reused, and the nutrients within that can be boosted by microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, earthworms, all sorts, to then be uptaken again by plants, and just kind of the cycle repeats itself. And I think one thing for me with earthworms as well as composting, we know that the way that we're farming the soil, be it with growing or large-scale arable or dairy production, the soil needs to be improved, because we've lowered the levels of organic matter quite considerably. So instead of looking at artificial fertilisers or composts or amendments, having a natural, organic, we're using nature to produce the compost. I think that's a really, really important thing for us to be able to focus on, and it's quite fun. Like I found I get quite addictive whenever I hear a fact. I tell everyone in the office, "Oh, new composting fact." So it's really rewarding, because you can see the food, you can eat it. Then say the eggshells you don't eat, obviously you can't. Then that goes into producing nutritious stuff to grow more.
So it saves waste and it actually feeds the soil at the same time. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a win-win.
So I didn't know, I must admit, when I first heard you talking about compost, and I just thought it's what we do in our gardens, where you lob in all your garden waste, rubbish in the kitchen, and you were putting cardboard and all that, and you said we need more cardboard. So we're going to talk about the different composting methods, but why, as a principle, do you need more? What are the ingredients of a great compost?
So rule of thumb is you need a bit of carbon, which can be anything from grass, like dried grass clippings, to cardboard, to shredded paper, newspaper, anything that's got that really rich carbon. Cardboard has quite a lot of phosphate in, which is really important in the kind of the whole process of composting. And when you add fresh waste, so that could be your veg clipping, your veg waste, your garden clippings, whatever it may be, you really need to get that ratio right, because plants and the soil in the natural environment has a certain carbon to nitrogen ratio, which is about 25:1 carbon to nitrogen. Right. So you really want to have more carbon to nitrogen, because that is the basis of organic matter. Sorry, going quite technical here. But you need organic matter in order to provide a home and structure for the soil. And then again, the soil food web, so all the microorganisms, the fungi, the bacteria. So that's why it's really important. And I've learnt pretty quickly doing this composting. It's a learning process, you can't go in expecting perfect compost straight away, because it takes a bit of time. If you don't add enough carbon, it becomes quite smelly, it doesn't smell great. Okay. I've learnt that the hard way, and there's quite a lot of liquid that comes off. But ideally, in a healthy compost with the right balance of carbon and nitrogen, you can get a much healthier, doesn't smell.
So if your carbon's smelly, if your compost is smelly, it's not, there's something wrong with the compost, and it shouldn't smell.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's quite the compost tells you how it's doing. If you've got lots of maggots, again, you need way more cardboard in there.
Right.
And just a top tip for people, cardboard, not the kind of cereal packets or magazines. You want the corrugated cardboard. Yeah. That is really, really beneficial compared to shredded paper, because with cardboard it's a bit more rigid, there's more structure to it. So when you add it to your pile, it doesn't just absorb water and go mushy and kind of sit in a stagnant pile, because that produces an anaerobic condition for the compost, which we don't really want if you're doing an open or hot composting. So cardboard is a bit more beneficial to that, because it retains its structure for a little bit longer, and again, like I said, it has that phosphate in, which is really important for the microbes to feed off it.
Brilliant. So there are main types of composting. Can you tell us what they are and explain what the difference is between those three types.
So at FarmED, I've kind of been in charge of implementing these compost systems on site. I have to say I'm trying to make sure we become circular in all of our food and kind of office waste, because at the moment we're not, and I think it's something that every business, every household, every organisation should be circular. Because
and circular, by circular you mean?
I mean, apologies, not any of the food going to landfill,
right?
Because
okay, yeah.
although we do know that hopefully in Oxfordshire that we're quite good with sending food waste to anaerobic digesters, which produces energy that we can then use in homes, but we don't know, essentially, we hope that it ends up there, but if the anaerobic digester says, no, we've got too much today, it then goes to landfill. So, in the UK we produce 9.5 million tonnes a year of food waste, but then
9.5 million tonnes.
Yeah, but we're the most obese country in the UK. So there's a misbalance going on. So yeah, I'm really passionate about trying to implement it, and hopefully we'll kind of create a platform for people to learn from. I'll happily admit my mistakes and my learnings to take forward. So our 3 ones that we've got on site, we have a compost tumbler, which is essentially just an elevated hot composting system, but it's pest free because it's raised from the ground. We have Bokashi, which is a Japanese fermentation form of composting, and we have vermicomposting.
So how to start with the first one? What is it and what does it involve? And so our traditional sort of garden compost.
Yeah.
What would that be called? When you just lob everything into a compost bin that you buy from the garden centre? Which is that one of those, or is that different?
So essentially it's the same principle as our compost tumbler, which our compost tumblers, it's about 1 metre off the ground, and it's a big cylinder that we can rotate manually. So that is the same principle as your open, I think it's called crate composting, and you basically just put all your food waste, garden waste in layers in a crate, and you have to turn it manually, roughly about, it can vary, once every 3 months, once a month, depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
But obviously that's quite physical, because you're turning a lot of food waste and garden waste manually with a fork, which for some people isn't really possible if they've got back issues, or they're not able to do it for some reason. So this compost tumbler, I can vouch, very, very easy.
Really?
Yeah, all you do is that there's nice handles, and you just spin it, and you're supposed to do it, once every 3 days. So it's a bit more, you have to keep remembering to do it. Yeah. But every time you add stuff, it's quite a good reminder just to turn it. And because it's all enclosed, so the cylinder where you put all the food waste, there's a lid and you close it. There's a few air vents just to let the microbes breathe and have oxygen. Because it's a form of hot air composting. So that again retains lots of carbon dioxide from being released, because when you have your open crate composting, the microbes that help break down the organic matter, they are respiring, which means they're producing lots of carbon dioxide. And obviously we know that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas emission. Obviously the microbes at that scale, they're not contributing to climate change, but if we want to try and reduce the amount of carbon that's being emitted, then a compost tumbler is a good alternative. And the way that we operate it is we have 2 sections to the compost tumbler. So there's 2 chambers. So we fill one up one day, and then the next day we do the other one, and then we switch alternate compartments every other day, because that means that once you've added stuff, you have to wait a little bit for the microbes to take action and start kind of decomposing and doing their thing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. So what's Bokashi?
So Bokashi is probably one that not many people have heard of.
I've not heard of that.
It's a very fun word. It's a Japanese form of fermentation. The microbes that are used are called effective microbes. I can't remember the Latin name of the bacteria, but it's a type of lactic acid. So what it looks like, it's a type of bran. So think kind of fish food, that kind of texture. You sprinkle that. That's the Bokashi. That's the active ingredient. So this form of composting is slightly different, because you have to add that ingredient. Obviously with the compost tumbler, you don't add anything apart from the food and the garden waste. With Bokashi, adding that bran helps speed up things, and it actually is an anaerobic process. So aerobic with the compost tumbler is with oxygen. anaerobic is without oxygen. So
Right,
that's probably
okay.
one of the biggest things. And what the science is showing is that with it being anaerobic, it actually decomposes much quicker, because you're literally providing the bacteria, which is the bran, an instant food source. So it's kind of like they're immediately activated, and it's really quick, and you can produce compost in up to 5 to 12 weeks.
Oh wow!
Which
It's quick.
Yeah, most gardeners, if they're doing the open crate stuff, will take about a year to produce good stuff. And obviously, if you have a large scale system, you want to be producing compost on a much quicker time frame. But there are lots of different ways to use Bokashi. Just for an introduction, if you're doing your food, kitchen waste at home, you basically want to get about 2 to 3 inches of food waste, and then squash it down, with a back of a spoon or whatever you want to use. Sprinkle 10 grams of Bokashi over the top, and then you do another layer of food, another layer of Bokashi, another layer of food, and you fill up kind of just a tub. You can buy them. There's lots of different places online to buy them. And then you let it sit in that tub for about 2 to 3 weeks. It releases quite a lot of liquid, as obviously vegetables and kitchen waste is quite high moisture content. So that releases a lot of liquid. You can use that liquid on your house plants, on your veg bed. And then once it's composted after 2 to 3 weeks, then you can put it outside onto a bigger compost pile, and then it will turn into compost again more quickly after that. So it's like the bacteria is digesting the food for us, so it's a much quicker process. It's very different. I'm learning again a lot. I'm not an expert, but you can also use it on muck heaps for farmers out there. On a muck heap, it basically retains all the carbon and nitrogen in the muck heap rather than evaporating off. And usually when you uncover the Bokashi pile of the muck heap, it doesn't smell, but normally when farmers are spreading muck around, because you can smell it.
Smelly,
But with Bokashi, because all of the nutrients are retained, they're not being evaporated, and the microbes aren't releasing all of those smelly gases. It's all retained, and all the nutrients are retained. So it's a fascinating product, and we're only really discovering what it can do.
Right, amazing. And so explain. So the final one is vermi. Now I got this wrong. I called it vermiculture. So it's vermiculture and vermicompost. So what are those? What's the difference between those two terms, basically?
So vermi, to start off, is worm in Latin, for those linguists out there. And vermiculture is when you breed worms in a farm system to then give to fishermen for fishing bait, basically. So that's
vermicompost is very different.
Vermicompost is different, So vermicompost is essentially using earthworms and microorganisms to produce a really, really rich compost. Now, I am a bit biased, but this is my favourite kind.
Of course it is.
I love earthworms. So this type of composting, we use epigeic earthworms, again, referring to Latin, great language. Epi often means surface, so epigeic earthworms only inhabit in a natural system the very surface of the soil. They don't actually live in the soil. They will be, in leaf litter, under logs or under plant pots. They don't eat soil. They only eat really, really high organic matter products. So having them in a compost bin is ideal for them. And they'll actually only inhabit kind of the top 2-3 inches of the compost bin, which is where you're constantly adding more food. And so what's quite important in this system is you need to have some bedding for them. So the bedding, their favourite bedding is often manure, because again, that's representative of their natural, where they were evolved in the field, and that's really, really rich in lots of great nutrients for them. But other types of bedding can include that important cardboard. Wood chip is great for them, a bit of soil, leaf litter, anything that's kind of brown and has got a good mix of carbon and nitrogen already. That's a really good base layer for them to have. And then basically what you want to do is the worms will be happy living in that bedding. They can eat their own bedding. If you don't feed them, they won't die because there is stuff for them to eat. But obviously what we want to do is give them our food waste. Now the one we have here on site is quite small. I would love to go bigger and expand to produce more food waste. To reduce food waste and produce more compost. Basically, you give your earthworms a small amount of food. The annoying thing about them is that they're quite picky. You can't just feed them a set amount, X amount of food, and in X amount of days they'll need feeding again. It depends what you're feeding them. They love watermelon.
Do they?
Yeah, they're quite exotic creatures. They absolutely love it. It's probably, apart from manure, that's probably their favourite food. Yeah, so if you give them lots of watermelon, they'll eat it really quickly. But if you're giving them, for example, this year I gave them the pods of a broad bean. And
didn't like it.
No, they did. They really liked it, which is interesting.
So what don't they like?
They don't like, so this is when it gets quite technical, they don't like anything acidic. So citrus.
They don't give them any lemons or
no lemons,
oranges.
No oranges. And same again with acidity, onions or garlic, anything of an allium. So
would that kill them or?
No, they just wouldn't eat it.
Right, okay.
So that would mean that basically, again, this is an aerobic form of composting. So because it uses oxygen, there's going to be lots of bacteria, but because essentially what you're doing is you're just putting food waste in some soil. If the earthworms don't eat it quickly, it'll then go mouldy, and then you'll attract pests, bugs, nasty flies, maggots, which you don't really want. It's not the end of the world, you can control it, but with you want to basically make sure that if you're going to put an onion in, they're not going to eat it, and it'll just go mouldy and it'll track things. So there's no point in putting it in. That's where Bokashi comes in handy, So there's other forms of composting.
Right, that's that. So you can basically have them all going on at the same time, somewhere like FarmED. So we've got all 3 systems going at the moment.
We have, yes.
And we're hoping to expand that.
We are. Yeah. So with the earthworms, again, they are quite slow. It takes, think of an earthworm, they're quite small. They can't get through a lot. I mean, they did eat those broad bean shells. I was very impressed. But, it takes 2.5 hours for food to go from the mouth of an earthworm to its bum to poo it out.
Okay.
So
little fact.
Yeah, exactly. But think about that small amount of food they're eating. It's very
quite
slow.
Yeah.
So this year we actually a couple of weeks ago harvested for the first time our worm poo. It took 9 months to produce 10 kilos of food waste. Earthworm poo, which is it's a lot. But again, that was on a really small system. So I'm very excited to expand and get more compost really going, because again, the special thing about earthworm poo is that yes, you can use the compost in itself. It's a very friable, really great for starting on your seedlings, or again just planting in or putting it on top of your veg growing area. But if you want to kind of use up more of your worm poo and to spread it over a larger area, you can make worm tea, which is basically soaking the poo in water. And that actually, the science has shown that it improves and increases the microbial community, and any bacteria, any microbes that are there are enhanced in water. So that means that you're again boosting the nutrients available for plants. And what's really great is when you then use the compost tea, when you spread it on the ground, plants obviously absorb water far quicker. They can absorb soil nutrients, because that takes longer for them. So in a way, compost tea is probably the best way for you to use earthworm poo.
Right.
And we're hoping to, with our 10 kilos that we harvested, we're going to roll it out, and we're going to probably do some experiments, see how it works. But the science is pretty concrete that it helps with yield, it helps with resistance to pests and diseases as well, which we know is really, really important to reduce costs of pesticides and insecticides. So that's really useful. It also helps increase the nutrient density of the plants. So yeah, it's an all-round amazing
substance. Absolutely. So if people are listening to this and think, I want to get started with some compost, so obviously we did run a compost course this year at FarmED. We're hoping to run one again next year, so keep an eye on that. But if they actually want to get going, how would they start? What would be the first bit of kit they need, and how would you, if you've done no composting at all, and you're just chucking your food in the little recycling bin that gets taken away by the bin men, what's the first thing to do?
I think it would probably be just figuring out how much space you have how much time you want to commit to things, and what you're going to use the end product.
Right. Okay.
So if you kind of just have a little think to yourself, none of these systems take up a lot of space. Obviously, at the farm, we have a
bigger versions.
Yeah, we have a fully operational kitchen. We have a farm. Yeah. There's a lot of waste coming off the land that we want to make the most of. So, yeah, figure out like how much food waste you're producing, how much grass clippings you're using, and the one thing I would say is compost tumblers. The kit itself is quite expensive, so that's you can do open crate composting. I would recommend that as well.
Right. So you could get going with that, and then
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Bokashi is very simple.
Is it?
Because all you have to do, as I explained earlier, layer up the food, wait 2 weeks, pop it into your traditional composting system, so that open crate one, and then it's just quicker and there's less turning around.
So rapid compost.
Exactly. You just have to make sure you cover it in tarp or black plastic or whatever you want to cover it. Or if you've got a composting bin, just put the lid on. If you want to have a bit of fun with it, earthworm's great. I think for me, I absolutely love knowing the fact that I've given them eggshells, I've given them banana skins, I've given them pears.
I guess if you've got children as well, I mean, it's just quite nice to, you can just they're like your little pets, aren't they?
Exactly.
And they go and feed them, and then you see what they've eaten, and it's all just gone.
And it's a truly, I mean, I can't believe that, we started off with a whole, banana peel, and then at the end we've got this beautiful, beautiful thing. It doesn't smell.
Magical, really, isn't it?
It is.
Good for your gardens, good for farmers.
Exactly. And there's no bad thing about it. But if you, with earthworms again, it is quite slow. So you just got to weigh up what's best for you. But there are quite a lot of cheap kits online, or if you have just a bin. One of my mentors, she said that you can have a worm bin in a plastic bag, as long as they've got food and some air hole, or they've got some oxygen. That's it really. You can do it out of some what are they called? Like shelving units.
Oh yeah,
as long as it's plastic. And as long as the earthworms can move within the levels. There's loads of opportunities. It's great. I
Have
could talk for
earthworms
hours.
in your dresser.
Maybe not.
Brilliant. Thanks, Danielle. That's been fascinating. Thank you so much.